Hey, it's Coach Anderson again from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to look at lesson number 7. And lesson number 7, of course, is going to be our summative assessment. And looking at summative assessment, what we want you to understand and want you to know about it is that these are the questions that we are trying to answer as a result, of course, of looking at this particular unit. There are questions like the unit focus question, but there are also practice questions that would be very beneficial to you if you're going to be taking the benchmark test for your particular school, or if you're going to be taking the MAP assessment, of course, in the spring, or even if you're taking the MAP assessment, of course, at Christmas. So what we want you to do, of course, is to go through and look at what this unit focus question is. And unlike the previous times where we went over this question, we didn't address it, today we will address it. The question says, should government take on the role of provider for its people in times of economic upheaval? Well, that's one of those open-ended kind of questions, and I don't know how you fall in on it. Some people, of course, would support it, and then some people would not. If you were a Democrat or a liberal, because of FDR's influence traditionally, they're more inclined to support government involvement to ease economic upheaval. But if you're a Republican or a conservative, typically believes in less government involvement and more of a laissez-faire approach. So it just depends on what side of the political spectrum you kind of fall on. There's no right or wrong here. It just depends in terms of how you see government, in terms of how government, of course, should function. And then looking at most of them, when it comes to this particular question, this will cause probably more conflict, of course, in your household than anything else. So it may be one of the situations where you might want to avoid talking about it as much as you can. So liberals typically, of course, like the idea of government, of course, intervening, of course, in everybody's, in American citizens' affairs. Republicans, conservatives, not so much. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at practice questions. We have like 5, I think, practice questions or so. And you can answer these questions, of course, yourself. I would write them down if I could and try to leave them in my journal as a reference that I can go through, of course, and look over and study and try to get the main ideas about what each one of them is talking about. Now, some of these questions, of course, they were created by myself, and some of them, of course, were created from the Mississippi Department of Education's website in terms of practice questions. This is what was the reason for the establishment of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Well, the Securities and Exchange Commission was one of those 15 acts that was passed in the first 100 days, and the purpose of it had to do with securities or stocks. So the answer, of course, would be to regulate stock transactions. You have to remember that one of the issues in the country that leads to the Great Depression, of course, is going to be stock transactions, buying on margin. People were, situation where people were buying, stocks based on, inside information. So it's going to hold all sorts of problems that the Securities Exchange Commission, of course, will be responsible for regulating when it comes to the sale of stocks. Next question. This summary describes a new government agency. The Banking Act of 1933 created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, which insures bank deposits. This reform protected banks and consumers from the type of losses banks faced at the beginning of the Great Depression. Which statement explains the way this act expanded the power of the federal government? Well, think about it. Republicans, of course, always said that the government should stay out of the affairs of business, out of the affairs of banking. So when you look at it and think about it, what the answer possibly could be is it gave the government the power to regulate deposits or protect deposits in a bank. Failure, in other words, is here. Rather than people blindly putting their money in the bank, the government would step in a private businesses, because most banks are private businesses, and what it would do, of course, is it would step in and interfere in the running of a private business. In this particular case, a good thing for consumer, good thing for consumer. How did President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal increase the size and the power of the federal government? Well, that should be a pretty easy one for us to handle. When you look at it, the New Deal created new federal government agencies and passed legislation that regulated the economy. Once again, FDR is a Democrat. Democrats don't necessarily prescribe to the idea of laissez-faire or limited government in this particular case. They believe in a more expansive role for government in the affairs of business. 4, how did President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal programs most affect women and other minorities? Well, when you look at the 4 things here, one of the things we could tell you is that FDR was beloved by minorities, by women, of course. Anybody who was affected by the Great Depression would probably say that FDR, of course, could do no real wrong. So most FDR's New Deal policy supported organized labor, gave workers the voice to demand better working conditions, whether you were a woman in the workplace, you were African American in the workplace. You have to also understand, for the first time, in the history of this country, let me say that again, for the first time in the history of this country, the federal government actually passes something to prevent discrimination in government jobs. And that's something done by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Use the events listed for question number 5. Use the events listed to answer the question. Creation of Social Security, legalization of collective bargaining by the Wagner Act, the passage of the National Recovery Act. How was FDR most impacted by this list? Well, when you think about it, Social Security, legalization of collective bargaining, or the Wagner Act, the passage of the National Recovery Act. When you look at it, the Supreme Court decided that its powers are extending into the legislative branch. In other words, this here. One of the things that these 3 things did is that they brought the most criticism onto FDR. So when you look at those 3 things as a whole, those are the things that they did, is they caused the criticism of the New Deal and FDR. All right, the one thing that we want you to also do is we want you to complete a project, of course, based on the information that we've given you throughout this particular unit. And in this particular project, it is called the New Deal, a blueprint for change, and it will give you a little bit of an overview. You're to choose, a topic or area of focus, from the New Deal, whether it's economic, social welfare programs, agriculture programs, labor reforms, or long-term impact on society. Research phase, go through and conduct research on the topic that you choose. And then, of course, the presentation. We want you to, create a presentation that would include a visual component, a brief oral presentation, and answer potential questions from classmates. So what we want you to do, of course, is to complete this particular project. It should take you a day or so, of course, of real, of real investigation to complete. We have included a rubric, of course, for you to guide your, your thought process, of course, and your creation. And once again, once it's completed, you should turn it in, of course, to your teacher, of course, for a grade. And once again, rubric, of course, will be included at the end of the slide presentation in the reference page. We hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about the New Deal in terms of what FDR did, of course, to restore Americans' confidence. And one of the things we want you to take away from this is this here, that FDR's presidency does more to change the American way of life probably than any other president, because what he does is he provides the government safety net for people in the United States of America. Whether you support that or you don't support that, that is one of the legacies, of course, of the New Deal. The expansion of government power, the expansion of government, and the safety net, and creation of entitlements. So when you look at FDR, and you look at Democratic administrations, of course, that will follow him, a lot of them will fall in with FDR's train of thought when it comes to the government of the United States of America. Well, once again, that concludes unit number 9, the New Deal. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about the New Deal. We hope you'll go through, of course, and complete the activities that we've created for you to give you a better understanding, of course, of what the New Deal was all about. But remember, as we tell you all the time, please don't take my word for it. Do your own research, reach your own conclusions, and make up your own mind. Because if it's America's history, that means it's your history, and we'll see you next time.